All right. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. We are joined by people from Australia up to Europe in this session, where we're going to talk about the Agile Contract Manifesto that we have launched in the first quarter of this year. The topic of Agile contracts is a topic that a lot of people are interested in. We got a lot of returns after launching the manifesto. So today it's going to be a celebration day because we never had a real launching party. We launched it under the radar a little bit. And so today we thought, because of all this fantastic feedback we are receiving, let's organize a celebration. And then obviously, you know, how do you organize a celebration? It's a global event. It's something, so obviously we are going to do virtually. And then we said, you know, we've been giving our opinion about Agile contracts already in our contract manifesto. Let's maybe try to invite people who are actually applying it and who are experts in the field, and let them talk about their opinion on Agile and contract. So this is our panel. The panel is an exceptional panel. We had, you know, in the beginning, we didn't dream of having such a fantastic group of people. I will introduce you to the 4 panel members as soon as we start the panel conversation. But before we go into that conversation, I would like to give a little bit of time to Mirko. Mirko Kleiner is one of the people who have co-designed the Agile Contract Manifesto. He is going to give a very short introduction into what it contains, what the manifesto is, where it comes from, how we have come to what we have written down. So Mirko, just a few words on who he is. Mirko Kleiner is a Swiss person coming from a space where he wants to change procurement to a more lean and agile approach. He's giving a lot of training and workshops on this. He's the author of the Lean Agile Procurement Canvas. And you know, next to all these things, what is fantastic is Mirko is a wonderful, warm person, and so he always brings a spark of fun in every conversation we're having. And so I'm going to leave the word to him now. Mirko,
yeah,
if you would like to share the presentation as well.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, and I can look at myself through your screen at this point.
Excellent. Yeah, so I will keep my introduction, and this is not my introduction, it's really the introduction of the whole team. So we are a global group of experts, a diverse group that crafted this manifesto. And I just wanted to give you a short insight about how it came, what's the purpose, who was involved, and yeah, where you can find it and so forth. So I assume you guys want to hear the panelists, so we keep that as short as possible. So my time box 5 minutes, and let's just kick it off. So you might be familiar with the original Agile Manifesto, which just got turned 20 years, where some IT guys met and created it, and its purpose was to overcome the increasing level of complexity and uncertainty and to improve ways of working in IT and software. Today, it's less of a question if agile, then why not? And its values and principles evolved across the functions, levels, and industries. So a similar development we like to initiate with the complementary Agile Contract Manifesto. Contracts, and I like this metaphor, are kind of the glue that hold the world's economy together. People, organizations, and countries make binding commitments to each other through contracts. Historically, contracts have this commitment set kind of in concrete, right? They were not flexible. But with the rise of complexity and uncertainty, even large organization feels the need to be more responsive, not just in their collaboration, but also having more agile contracts in place. The manifesto is intended to provide guidance through conflicting demands of persistence and responsiveness. To create a statement that can be widely supported, it was essential to have all the voices represented. What you see here are is our global group of creators or co-creators, and it took a lot of time to come together and to find the challenge, create a solution, and identify consensus among diverse and conflicting interests. In our case, it took us almost a year to get from idea to done. So I'm still questioning if the original manifesto was really done in just a weekend. So we'll see. So first of all, let's say thank you and give all the co-creators and give them a round of an applause. So you might know this. So thank you all for, it was a big to collaborate on that. So finally, where can you find the Agile Manifesto, Contract Manifesto? Just look up agilecontractmanifesto.org. And we want the manifesto to be pragmatic, not preachy. So we emphasize empirical observations while avoiding statements of belief. Unfortunately, there is no simple way like a template, but many conflicting tensions as we went along crafting this manifesto. The manifesto is intended as a signpost towards good results, while not claiming to be a silver bullet. You can read the 4 values and 10 principles as mentioned on the website. And yeah, my personal favorite is principle number 10. A good contract is one that anybody can understand. And for the lawyers that are with us today, they say, yeah, where's the problem? But for all the others, you know, sometimes it's really hard. And I think, as I said, this is my preferred one, but there is definitely more to read and to understand. So now enough from us, back to Stijn and the panel. I'm curious about their point of view of our work and if and how this could be applied in reality.
Right. Thank you very much, Mirko. So that's indeed the difficulty, right? We are writing something like a manifesto, which is a set of values and principles. And then people are asking us, hey, where's the template? And so it's about something that that is too abstract for many people. So let's dive into how it really can be applied with people who are more expert than anyone else. I'm going to introduce you to the 4 panel members. First, Lambert Swillens, a executive vice president of Capgemini. He's the head of global delivery excellence in financial services at Capgemini. Could you say a few words about yourself, Lambert, and what you're expecting from the conversation today?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Lambert Swillens, happy to be part of this panel and this event. And big thanks already to all the people who contributed to this discussion and the manifesto. I am like 39 years, I think, in the IT services industry, first working on the bank side and then since 35 years in the Capgemini family. So I'm one of these old-timers that has lived extensively the pre-Agile period. And I'll be very candid here. I was at the beginning a very cool believer in the Agile movement. Now working primarily for large banks and insurance companies across the globe. So my role is to supervise the and support the programs, projects, concept in itself, which is getting outdated. Across the globe, from Australia and Japan, over Middle East, Europe to North America. So we have about 1,100 engagements running at the same time throughout the year. I would say we've seen in this market a lot of change, and almost all of the large insurance and banks have adopted something they called Agile, let's put it like that, in very different levels of maturity. And sometimes it's adopting some rituals, it's what is sometimes called a lipstick on the pig, to the ones that are truly aiming to come to a high maturity level with Agile, with all the consequences and the transformation that requires. When I was in in a meeting with the vice presidents of financial services about 8-9 years ago. I said, guys, there's something important happening in the market. And on one side, we see that when clients go agile, I think of ING, ABN AMRO in the Netherlands, ANZ in Australia. If they ask us to go fixed price, we struggle. And if you don't go fixed price, the pressure of procurement and others, we go to body shopping. And then we lose our differentiation as a large company and we cannot bring the full value to the client. So that's why our journey with contracting started. And with the support of Stijn and many other colleagues, we started collecting lessons learned from the painful cases, but also success stories. And that is where we came to our vision on, okay, how can we do that better? And I hope that we can share later today in the conversation some of those examples. I still live it every day. We still have cases where a client says, oh, a new CFO, everything needs to go fixed price. So how do we do this? Panic. Yeah. And I've been in many of these workshops where I then usually ask myself or propose Stijn or other colleagues to go in a session with the client to have that conversation. And in most cases, in the end, the client understands that there's better ways to contract for Agile than the old-fashioned fixed price, which leads to a lot of friction and polarization. Or on the other side, cherry picking on people, and then the client is finally ending up with all the problems on their own side. So they are absolutely alternatives. We see them progressing in most cases. They are very successful. And at the end, when we do a retrospective with the client after a year or so in the collaboration, we get very positive feedback on that. So that's my view on the challenge we have in front of us.
All right, thank you, Lambert. That was an extensive introduction.
Sorry.
I should have mentioned the 1 minute or 2 minute rule.
Yeah, sorry.
So let's go to our next panelist, Gerwin Pol from the Netherlands. Could you please introduce yourself and what you're expecting today?
Okay, thank you, Stijn and Mirko, for having me here. So my background has been in sourcing. I've worked in sourcing since 1995 when I did my first deal. I've also worked for Gartner, where I led the sourcing practice for the Benelux, and was part of a lot of the thinking that Gartner has developed around sourcing and contracts and all those things. Since 2008, I founded my own consulting firm, Whitebridge Consulting, which basically we set up around new ways of working actually, and it functions as a cooperative with a number of partners, all independents working together under one brand, and still purely doing sourcing and predominantly doing the strategy and tender phase and the benefit realization afterwards. What we're doing in 2017, we decided to actually go one step further, and we actually founded one of the largest independent communities for independent advisors, sourcing advisors and professionals, Indysource. And I am one of the directors there and managing the community and working together to actually see if we can help progress the profession of sourcing. What I'm looking forward to is actually getting a little bit better understanding of what everybody understands under agile contracts, because I think that's one thing that we can at least agree on, that there is no common understanding on that.
Absolutely, yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Gerwin. So we have the provider side of the story, we have the sourcing side of the story. Now let's look at Peter Merel from Australia. Thank you very much for, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Because this
Merel
is the Flemish way of pronouncing your name.
I love it.
All right, please introduce yourself and say what you're expecting from today.
So I've been involved with Agile since before it was called Agile. I keynoted the very first Agile conference and ran the first Agile game there. This is XP 2000, and got a credit in Kent Beck's first Agile book. But I felt that there was a massive hole in what Agile was trying to do. And this really came to a head for me when I was presented with a bunch of business and product definition problems in Australia's largest banking group when I was running a transformation for them. This is Commonwealth Bank of Australia. And that led to the formation of a toolkit we call XSCALE. So these days, I head up a group of about 150 the world's most seasoned business agility coaches. We define business agility as the capability to respond to changing market conditions, that being the big gap. And if you want to see how big a gap, the State of Agile survey says 95% of people don't do that. When I came to look at the Agile Contract Manifesto, I came with somewhat informed eyes because we came up with a manifesto ourselves for descaling. And a lot of what I'm seeing in the Agile Contract Manifesto reminds me of some of the debates that we've had there. So what I'm really interested in with Agile Contract Manifesto is I agree contracts are the glue that hold business ecosystems together. But ecosystems are all about mutual benefit. And what I'm really interested in is how we can maximize mutual benefit and deal with the market bottlenecks that get in the way of it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that, Peter. I'm looking forward to your input here. And then last but not least, we had Sally Rhodes, the CEO of World CC, lined up as well. Unfortunately, she's been held up with another obligation and had to travel to Stockholm today. But she gave us two things in return. One is her apologies, her sincere apologies. She wanted to be here, but real life kicks in sometimes. And then secondly, the fantastic Adrian Furner, who has been working with us on creating this contract manifesto, and he's going to represent World CC. Adrian?
Excellent. Thanks, Stijn. Yes, apologies from Sally. My name is Adrian Furner. I'm an executive in residence at World Commerce and Contracting. For those of you who don't know World Commerce and Contracting, we're a member-based association. We're a not-for-profit, a global not-for-profit with about 80,000 members globally in over 20,000 organizations, 180 different countries. And we work with our members and we use our membership experience and insights to help us do policy shaping and advocacy, industry enablement, organizational capability, and individual performance. Why do we do that? Because we believe our purpose is to help our members create better contracts, better business, and better society. So some of the areas we've been involved in over the last 3 years are topics like uncertainty management, which we started pre-pandemic. How do we better deal with uncertainty? How do we leverage supply ecosystems, not just networks, but how do we really do what Peter was saying, really create business arrangements that are symbiotic and mutual and adaptive. And we also focus on contract simplification. We believe that contracts need to be user-centric. Our recent research showed that in an average organization, 26% of the workforce interface in some way with a contract. In some industries, it's up at 80%. In other industries, it's lower. But the contract is that glue. And I think, Stijn, your point that, we've come up with a simplicity in our contract manifesto. Sometimes simplicity, or always simplicity, takes conscious design and can take longer than creating complexity from our experience. My background is I was a commercial procurement operations director across a number of different sectors, but I spent about 10 years in my career really working in an R&D innovation space where you don't know what you don't know. And therefore, creating contracts that were agile and adaptive was really important. So hopefully I'll bring some of that experience to the debate this morning.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much. So let's go into questioning you guys, the experts. And I'll maybe start with an opening question with Lambert. As you mentioned in the beginning, you have been with us in the industry for many, many, many years. And so you were there pre-Agile, right? So the question is, Agile contracting is a response to changing needs during execution, but those changing needs have always been there in one way or another. So why don't the traditional contracts and the change management that a lot of companies are applying, why don't they do the trick anymore?
That's a good question. Well, I think the answer is simple, but many people, CIOs, procurement, also on the provider side, probably did not want to acknowledge it yet. Yeah, I'll give you an example. It was a large program to implement the core banking package in large bank in Ireland. Went there every month, no, every other week. Last flight from Ryanair, from Brussels, no, from Charleroi to Dublin, to visit the project team. We're engaged on a 24 months program. We had 641 deliverables, might have been 643. I remember the exact number. It was initially foreseen with 2 go lives, I believe, and we got started. After 9 months, we were overstaffed. We had didn't have the progress as planned. A lot of discussions with other providers being present, client not being available on our side, skill challenges, and the CIO changed. The CIO had a different view on the way forward, and we had to renegotiate the contract. That scenario, I'll skip forward, happened 3 times over the duration of that program. Yeah, so the reality in the client environment changed. Different go live strategy, product strategy being revisited. So I think that illustrates, and I've seen many examples of that. So I think as an industry, we had to find a way to deal with that uncertainty and that that world that becomes more and more VUCA. Yeah. Now, the answer to that was clearly Agile, but the contract forms in the beginning had not followed. As I said, either it was still fixed price, or we went to pure staff augmentation, body shopping, cherry picking of people. If you go with Agile and fixed price, I've seen that we go in with high level requirements, yeah, and we try to fix it in a fixed price. My usual statement is, and I'll not put that in a proposal to a client, but my usual statement, as soon as the product owner starts doing his job or her job, we have to raise our hand and say, yeah, but this is not the requirement as we had understood it. So we need to write you a change request today. Yeah. So the nature of the Agile work and the role of the product owner of refining the high level requirements into something that can be groomed, that can be prepared for the build team, that in itself is something which is not matching with the concept of a fixed price, which require a fixed scope, and a fixed scope at a pretty detailed level. Yeah. So there you already see the obvious thing. The other point, fixed price creates polarization. Yeah, we know that. In the past, these large programs, that polarization happened between procurement and the vendor representative and so on. But to a large extent, I would say 90% of the team was not in that battle. When you start doing fixed price and Agile environment, you bring that polarization into the heart of the team in the day-to-day work they do. Yeah, and the sprint planning meetings, in the acceptance meetings, in all the different rituals you have to do in the team. And that is killing the collaboration, and that's killing to a large extent the strength of an Agile delivery. Yeah, collaboration is at the heart, and that polarization kills that collaboration. So that is why we have seen that fixed price constructs applied on that new Agile paradigm, it always leads to problems. And of course, people are very creative in that. And they found many ways around, like they say, oh yeah, but we can change the scope. So then we take out one part of the scope and put in other part of the scope, but then the discussion starts about how did you estimate that? Yeah, and we are in the discussion again. So even these workarounds, they are not very successful. You lose, I would say, 60–70% of the benefit of an Agile approach when you try boxing the solution, the contract, the delivery into a fixed price construct. Yeah, I've seen it working with packages. When you do package implementation, a guide wire implementation, but then we start counting things. We say, oh, we have 50 interfaces. These are the assumed complexities and so on. Yeah, but then if you change your mind and you need to change these interfaces and so on, you're in the discussion again. So there's a very limited benefit of applying the fixed price construct on any Agile delivery, in my experience. That's why fundamentally we need to rethink the paradigm, and that is what the Agile Manifesto, the Agile Contract Manifesto, really aims to do. And it's very ambitious. It's very ambitious. I think this is a start, but there's a long way to go before everyone will really understand what the shift in paradigm is, and then start applying it. But okay, we'll probably come back on how to apply it and what are the challenges we'll have to face there.
All right, thank you very much. So very insightful. Thank you, Lambert. The question is a question that for me is big enough to also ask Peter, as somebody who is coming with roots deep in Agile, right?
Okay. So
how do you look at the same thing?
This is a problem we've been struggling with since the start. It used to be a problem that was confined to tension between management and Agile delivery teams. And as we've moved closer and closer to business agility, it's moved up a few layers, and now this is where we're at. So Agile, at the end of the day, always tries to talk about we're trying to improve numbers, we're trying to improve ROI or throughput, or there's always a set of numbers. If we think in terms of pirate metrics, doesn't matter if it's a greenfields project, we can still be talking in terms of numbers, acquisition, activation, retention, all of that stuff. So if we're trying to improve numbers, we want to prioritize deliverables that are going to improve those numbers. We can't give you a statement of work up front because we don't know where the bottlenecks are going to be, where the constraint is going to be, because it'll move from bottleneck to bottleneck. So we need a contract that's going to describe how we're going to go about that process. If we're going to have a contract that assumes magically that we have perfect knowledge at the start and everything is going to be a change request after that, all we're really doing is putting a lot of bureaucracy on top of a set of processes that are already intended to respond and adapt to those sorts of changes. So one of the neat things in the Agile Contract Manifesto is this idea that we're putting together the rules of the game. There is an interactive, repetitive, iterative refinement process for our priorities. Usually if you have a statement of work, it doesn't say, well, deliver these, and then if you have time, deliver those. It's calling out fixed scope. What we want to be able to do is reprioritize continuously to keep focusing on the constraint, the key bottleneck that is interrupting whatever our outcome numbers are, or throughput in those terms.
All right, yeah. Thank you. Gerwin, I'm going to go to you with a different question. One of the biggest challenges we have for the manifesto is to bridge the gap between the intentions that it voices, right? We talk about principles and then the real application. What advice would you give to organizations that want to put in place things in accordance to the contract manifesto?
Yeah, a good question. You did change the question a little bit than the one I was expecting, but no. But I think if you look at the principles of the Agile Manifesto, or the Agile Contract Manifesto as they've been formulated, yeah. Coming from sourcing, for me, this is not new. I think if I go back to my Gartner days, I could find a presentation that has the same 4 values dotted around in the strategic sourcing era, where it's like, we need to change the way we source. We don't need static relationships. We need relationships that actually change. We need to go for simplicity. We need to, all those things were then in there. That is to around 2000. The question is, why aren't we already in this glorious time that we already have that? And I think there are a couple of, and this is something that has been bothering me and my colleagues a lot. Why are things not happening? We saw a couple of things. I already mentioned one of the things is, at the moment, I think one of the challenges is actually, what is an agile contract? I'm listening to Peter and I'm listening to Lambert, and I'm already going, yeah, but what are you talking about? What are you looking for? Because a lot of the things that were mentioned, I know solutions for, but does that really solve the solution that they're looking for? So that's one challenge. The other challenge, and this is something that is very dear to my heart, and coming from the sourcing perspective, I haven't heard a lot in the discussion around the Agile contract, but if around the time I was working at Gartner, we did a research together with the University of Southampton, and we actually looked at a dynamic between trust and control. So we said, okay, you need trust in a sourcing relationship, and you need at least there need to be some control. And they were looking at it, okay, how is that dynamic happening? And they came up with what they called a confidence index that actually could help you measure how much trust exists between the different organizations. And they found a number of things. One of the things which was quite interesting is that in trust, you actually have a level going up. You want to go going down, but let's not get there. That's a different discussion. Going up, basically start with people trust. We work together. I like you. You like me. I've seen you do good things. I expect you will do good things again. There's predictability, everything. Level up is actually team trust. I trust you because you're part of the other team, and I trust that team. You're new. You just got into the team, but I trust you anyway. One level up, and that's actually would also be a good way of actually to start thinking about the Agile Contract Manifesto into the terms of actually scaled Agile Contract Manifesto. You actually need organizations to trust. That is the highest level, where basically we're working together, regardless which team we're in, regardless what we're doing, we're actually trusting you because you're of the supplier or the customer. And that situation is what you actually want to get into in the more complex and more large sourcing relationships. And predictability is, for instance, one of those control mechanisms that you need. And we found that a lot of those control mechanisms, you always need them, but they're actually very much tied to the maturity of the sourcing organizations. Do you have certain processes? What Peter just called the principles, the rules of the game. Do you have that? Is it actually predictable what is going to happen? So if we're dealing with change, do we know how the other will react? Do we know what topics are that we actually need to negotiate about, and other things that actually will happen by itself? And if I look back at where we are now, I actually have seen, at least in the industry I'm looking at, I haven't seen a lot of progress in that. And Lambert just gave the example of the difference between fixed price and time and material. I think the problem is actually, I'm a little bit less worried about fixed price, because actually trying fixed price with Agile, I think that's a disaster waiting to happen. But what I see as the biggest problem at the moment is that with most of the Agile teams, DevOps teams, the whole move to product-centric IT, you actually see that those teams, their Pavlov reaction is to go to time and material, because that's the highest level of trust they can actually have. Because, okay, I've seen your CV, I've seen your face, I've heard your voice, I know what you've done in the past. Okay, I'll start to trust you. Whereas actually trying to go up, there's a complete lack of maturity in sourcing in most organizations. So they have a difficulty. You might actually have some ambition, but then it falls down very quickly. So that is one of the challenges that you need to do. The other challenge, and it's the final one, and that also was illustrated by one of the examples that Lambert gave, was when we, I think it's roughly 5-6 years back, we went back because our organization existed 10 years. We said, okay, let's try to find what are the real success factors for good deals, or what are the real fail factors. So why is a deal good? Why is a deal bad? And we used all the lists, all the success factors, and actually we found that none of those things actually determined if a relationship was good or bad. What we found that what made the relationship good or bad was actually what we started to call the core beliefs of the executives. So the executives that are actually responsible for the deal need to kind of say, yes, I believe that we can actually move to that higher level of maturity. And there is, when you're in an organization, you can really easily spot how these people are reacting. And if they're thinking more hierarchical and like more in a team structure, then often the only deal you can close is a time and material. Anything other complex will fail at a certain moment in time. And that is illustrated by the example that Lambert gave. The executive changes, he has a different belief on how how organizations should collaborate, and the deal fails. And that is, I think, the biggest challenge for the Agile Contract Manifesto, is actually dealing with that concept. So are we going to stay at that level of time and material CV-based sourcing, or will we actually get to a more complex and a more mature way of sourcing? And to put that in perspective, I gave a presentation about this topic couple of months back, and this was with the CIO community, and we did actually a survey, a polling under the 40 people attending, and we asked the question, how do you look at maturity in the organization? Do you see that as a problem for actually moving to more complex sourcing models? And their response was 100%, yes, I have a maturity problem. So I think that's one of the key challenges that we need to deal with, apart from understanding what our beliefs are, to secondly, we need to build up this capability and maybe move to something like a sourcing center of excellence in an Agile organization.
May I respond to you for a moment, Gerwin?
Yep.
Okay, so two things. First, trust, I agree. Establishing this between organizations is very challenging. That said, trust is a game theoretic artifact, and there are ways to manipulate reward models that will lead to high trust relationships and others that lead away from it. There's a lovely website by Nick Case called The Evolution of Trust, if anyone wants to explore just the baby version of that. When it comes to practical ways to deal with this, things like open book management come to the fore. But both you and Laurent have talked about this sharp tension between time and materials as a trust embedded form of contract and fixed price that seems to be without trust, or where we haven't got enough trust to be able to do anything but define a statement of work. What we use in XSCALE Alliance could be described as a little bit of both. What we typically do involves 3-month increments of work. Usually it's a combination of training and coaching, paid upfront. From the client's point of view, this is lovely because they're not risking a huge amount of money to see an outcome. From our point of view, it's lovely because we have freedom within that increment to define and redefine priorities according to what we learn. So the idea is we hold usually a large-scale review, an open space, to look at the quality of whatever kind of outcomes have been produced. And that's built into the contract, so that we're actually going to do that. And if at the end of that open space, the customer is of the opinion that, well, okay, we either got enough of the deliverable that we are happy, or we didn't get enough and we're not happy. Either way, they can say, well, great, thank you very much. From the point of view of providers, we're happy because we got paid up front before that 3-month period. So it gives everybody sufficient flexibility to respond if the relationship changes, without feeling that, oh, you know, gee, I've got a lot of stuff on the line if this doesn't work, and I've really got to manipulate the relationship in various different ways. So it fosters trust to be able to do it this way.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not conflicting with what I was actually saying, because it's actually what you're doing. You're putting things in place that will actually make it more predictable and actually lead to trust. And I think in Agile contracting, this is one of the ways we're actually starting to do that. And I've seen other examples which go a little bit further than that and actually also work very well. But in a sense, to actually be able to do that, you need to understand that actually you need to put those kind of these processes and things together. Otherwise, it will not work.
Yes.
Fantastic. The great thing is as well, people are reacting to what you're saying. We are seeing really interesting questions coming in at the same time. And one of them is one of the panel members, Lambert, right? You wanted to react.
Yes. Sorry. I just want to avoid that something would be misinterpreted. I certainly do not want to say that time material is the only alternative to fixed price, old school fixed price. On the contrary, I just say that these two extremes are outdated, are not effective for a good agile delivery. And as I said, the time material part, where we then provide a couple of fantastic software engineers and maybe some Scrum Masters and other profiles into a Scrum team, which is then mostly a mixed team. That is where we lose as a company, as Capgemini, part of our differentiation. And then we cannot take commitment on improvements, productivity gains, and so on. So the kind of sorry,
the customer loses even more. He's paying premium money for basically no added value for your resources.
So if I can further develop maybe a little bit what want to propose then. So that we have developed alternative models where we, and by the way, time and material is a way of invoicing. It doesn't say anything about the commitment. Yeah. I think there's a lot of other dimensions we need to consider. The conversation about what is the pyramid that we need, and also that pyramid in the team will evolve. What are the metrics, not only the lagging indicators, the output metrics, but also the metrics that we use to steer on a day-to-day basis the team. What is our role in the governance? Yeah, do we have a seat on the table in the steering committee and in the governance forums? And what were we expected to bring there? There's a great example in Germany, an insurance company who was for 2 years myself in the steering committee. There was every month a chapter to be provided by the Capgemini leadership. Yeah, and that's good. I mean, every month we had to bring a message. And, you know, you're looking at these 2 empty slides and okay, what can we bring as a message this month? Yeah, everything is green. Yeah, that's not a message to fill 2 slides. Huh? You still have to think about what are the improvements, the innovations, what do we see further down the line as attention points, as risk to be managed. Yeah, so that is really a good example of how, even though the technical invoicing happens through time and material, there is a commitment of giving advice, advising the client in the journey. And by the way, this was the first program at scale of the client where they applied Agile. So we have helped, while doing the work, the client growing their maturity in Agile. And we had very explicit and mature conversations about that. What would be the next steps? We've done maturity assessments on Agile way of working, which covered both the client organization and our own team. And that was very useful to fuel these conversations. What we also did in that client, and what I see as the preferred model as we see it today, and that might evolve over time, yeah, is that we put a certain percentage of fees at risk. That we say we have a capacity agreed, and we manage proactively that capacity, of course. We agreed the pyramid, the roles, the skills, and all these things. How do we measure these KPIs? And we discuss them in the governance. And then we say, let's put 10-15% of our revenues at fees at risk. And we carefully select the KPIs that drive that 15% fees at risk. And each time when we go for such a commitment, we have a conversation with these executives who are sponsor of the program. What are your objectives? Yeah, is it time to market? Is it product quality? Is it operational straight-through processing? Whatever it is, can be business objectives, can be IT objectives. Usually it's a combination of both. Yeah. Based on these objectives, we identify, and Stijn and his team have done an extensive work on that, of defining a whole catalog of KPIs and how they're defined and how they can be captured and so on. And based on these 3 to 5 KPIs, we then define the financial incentive mechanism behind it. And what is nice is that next to the potential penalty, up to 15%, yeah, we have usually also an upward potential, that we have also a bonus mechanism that is dependent on the same or other KPIs. And that is what gives what I call skin in the game. That makes that we do not only have a seat on the table, but we also have a financial impact of the performance of the team. The good thing about it, you can select a number of KPIs that are really a combination of client part and our part. So it drives collaboration and conversions rather than that polarization of the past.
Yeah, thank you. And this is a good answer to, you know, how it can be applied in real life. It's one of the solutions that one of the providers is coming up with. I think we can see this in the market everywhere. But I am now going to turn my attention to Adrian, who has not been able to come to certain questions. And you know, Adrian, I really appreciated the way that you have pushed us in creating this manifesto. You were part of the people that were creating it, and I'm quite sure you have like your own little babies in that in that manifesto. Is there one that for you stands out that you say, this is the fighting ground that I really believe in?
Yeah, and I think it builds on some of the conversation we've been seeing in the panel this morning, because in World Commerce and Contracting, as I said, our purpose is to help our members create better contracts, better business, better society. We don't see the contract as one single document, and therefore, for me, number 3 in the manifesto, contract, relationship, and governance need to move together, is really important. To get to better business, better society, we need to see contracts in the context of the totality and really work out what is the objective of the contract. What is that business success? What is that societal success that we really aspire to? What we see in a lot of our member organizations is that the contract is owned by the legal team or the contract management team. The relationship is owned by the executives or the account management team. The governance is owned by the project delivery team or the project management team. And they all act in isolation. They're pillars at the edge of the building. They don't overlap, they don't align, they don't adapt with each other. Perhaps the project delivery team changed the scope, it doesn't flow into the contract, the relation to the stakeholders don't understand that it's changed. I'm sure that will resonate with many of you. We believe we have to get success, bring together the contract, the relationship, and the governance, and move in choreographed way in alignment to create alignment and balance. So to bring this to sort of life, I've got an example that we were really privileged at our academic symposium last year to have Ugur Sahin speak as a keynote speaker. Now, Ugur is the founder and owner of BioNTech, who worked with Fosun in China and Pfizer to create one of the COVID vaccines. So it's very timely, we can all understand it. And if I distill what he explained to us of how they got to success, is initially it started as a conversation between CEOs. So it was about relationship. It was over dinner. They discussed what was the art of the possible. BioNTech had the mRNA platform experience. Pfizer had the scalability experience of producing billions of doses. They created a relationship. They very quickly moved to a set of governance principles. They also realized that normally it would take 12 months to negotiate a contract. So they actually put in place a one-page MOU. So you can see the relationship was really strong, the governance was building, and the contract was perhaps smaller in nature. As they moved through the development phases, they used the governance principles, the relationship, the MOU to really drive towards success. As they moved towards success, they could see that they were going to get regulatory approval for their vaccine. The dynamic needed to change slightly. We were moving to one where actually we needed to produce billions of vaccines. That required delivery efficiency. There was less agility required, more delivery efficiency. At that point, the relationship was still there, the governance principles were still there, but they built a contract or a series of contracts that supported delivery of the vaccines, the flow of rewards, the licensing agreements. So what you saw was there was a contract the whole way through, there was governance the whole way through, there was a relationship the whole way through, but it adapted depending on the requirements, depending on the levels of uncertainty. And the result was they created a vaccine in 10 months that would normally have taken 8 years to create. And thank goodness they did. So hopefully that little example kind of brings to life why I think that number 3 in the manifesto of contract, relationship, and governance need to move together is really a critical mindset for us. How do we bring contracting into Agile?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Wow. And a very recent example, applicable in real life to all of us. Okay. In the meantime, a lot of questions have come in, and we are at 8 minutes from the official end of our call today. So I'm going to start shooting some of the questions to our esteemed panelists here. The first question that came in is, I'm hearing that trust. The word trust is always creating emotion. When somebody releases that word, we always have people reacting. Trust culture are key to enabling agile contracts. Can somebody give an example of how they have changed the game?
How they have changed the game? Is that what you're saying?
How did you implement that, or how did you approach this beast of trust?
I can happy to build on that. I would really recommend on this topic everyone to read the book of Stephen Covey Jr. That's Stephen Covey from the 7 Habits, of course. It's one of my favorite leadership books. His son is also in the business of writing books and doing seminars. I was lucky to follow one of his seminars, both from the father and then from the son. His most important book is The Speed of Trust. It's excellent reading. Also in the seminar he gave, he got a lot of practical examples, and you can build trust by applying these techniques and the insight it gives and applying the techniques he recommends between people, but also between organizations. And I was lucky to read that book before I started as delivery executive in a large European customer, where the contracts were at that moment all fixed price. And then afterwards we had to convert these contracts to a more agile way of working. And there was a lot of distrust at the beginning. I think the main point is that we did a session with our account team. I showed them some videos from Stephen Covey. We talked through, and we try to find in our own direct working relationship with our counterparts, with the customer, examples where we could act differently. Yeah? Take a bit of risk, be transparent about our own challenges, ask for help. Yeah? And we've seen in most of the business lines, the interaction changing over a period of 3-6 months. I also had a quite strong relationship with Deputy CIO, and had also several sessions with him. It was a quick lunch where we talked about these things, sometimes in the evening, where I said, we need to do something about the collaboration between our teams. Yeah? By using this as a kind of mental framework, we start exploring changes in our behavior. And not in all cases, it paid off quite well. And I think we were able to, we were still in a...
I hate to interrupt you, Lambert, but I would love to add a larger context to this conversation. We have an example of an organization that worked with very high trust for multiple centuries, with 250 to 500,000 members. This is an organization known as the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It existed or still exists in North America. And the secret, the key to their success, the way they were able to maintain trust, was an artifact called the Great Law of Peace. So I completely get this. Covey's stuff is beautiful, but a lot of this stuff is drawing on older lessons. And if we look at that, there is something we can distill out of it. We call leadership as a service. It's a decision-making protocol. To be able to get trust to be established, we have to be able to make trade-offs between people who have different needs, different perspectives, and tensions. Particularly when we're talking about between organizations where they are trying to come up with something that is not necessarily going to wind up as a contract. We have to be able to sneak up on this and to do that iteratively. So there is an aspect to Agile Contract that we can talk about within an organization, but we already have a whole bunch of business structures that reinforce trust. But the neat thing about this Great Law of Peace is it's about what we do when trust breaks down. How do we recover it? And so the idea with leadership as a service is always about how do we resolve the tension between the needs of different directly responsible individuals and the collective of them. This works best when we can distribute missions across many, many teams at many, many levels. We maintain hierarchy, but it's always about how do we push autonomy downwards. So we don't have to rely always on getting our contracts negotiated at the top. They can be living contracts at multiple different levels and things that are revisited, not just on a 3-monthly or a monthly basis, but on a daily basis. We can do this stuff breadth first. So there are a lot of techniques we can bring to this that will increase the flow of learning and the establishment of trust at multiple levels of the organization, which is, I think, what we need in response to change.
I think, Peter, picking up on your point there, the vaccine example, what you're describing is exactly what Ugur Sahin described in his governance principles. They had an escalation route. So during the week, the information flowed freely because it was of a scale where globally society had to do something about it. So some of the traditional barriers came down. They had calls to share knowledge in the morning with China and in the afternoon with America. At the weekends, the executives had certain calls to escalate and make decisions that needed to be made at that level. So it was that relationship governance, but they still had a contract there that built over time. And it's how do we, bring all of this together to offer this sort of almost leadership as a service, as you say, that agile decision-making, not quick decision-making, agile, because it's got to be quality decision-making, not just quick, reactive, bad decision-making. So I think there's something in what you're saying there that's really at the heart of this.
Maybe guys, unfortunately, we're running out of time. We're at 2 minutes from the end. I only had the possibility to ask one question, so this demonstrates what a wonderful panel we have here. I would like to round up. There are other questions. These questions are not getting lost. We have a frequently asked questions section on our website. Some of those questions are things that the questions that I saw coming in today are things we treated already. I would like to thank you warmly for attending. The four of you for making time out of your busy schedule to be with us. Also, for those people who are passionate about the topic, this afternoon at 5 o'clock European time, there will be a second session with 4 different panel members who are going to give their opinion about the Agile Contract Manifesto. So do not shy away from joining in that session as well. The topics are going to be more or less the same, but we will hear 4 other, very intelligent minds talking about their experiences. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for being with us. There are a lot of actions that we are hoping you will take after this session. First, of course, to study the manifesto, and to secondly, sign the manifesto if you believe it is something that can change the industry. Those signatures are giving us the feedback that you find it an important topic. And then thirdly, well, obviously, we need attention. This is something that grows organically, and the more people are talking about it, are discussing about it, even if you disagree, a discussion is giving attention to the manifesto. So with that, I'd like to wrap up today, and thank you very much for coming with us, for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.